Movies are thought of as a visual art form, but they are so much more than that. Behind the stunning cinematography, there is a net of symphonies and leitmotifs. Composers are responsible for communicating meaning to the audience acoustically. Just like a painter paints a blank canvas with colors to convey emotions, a composer paints the air with notes from several musical instruments to evoke an emotional response from the audience, communicate themes and characters' internal conflict. Although there have been film movements that have tried to steer away from soundtracks, such as the realist movements of the 50s and Dogma 95 in the mid-90s, music has been a considerable part of filmmaking since the inception of cinema. Music was first used as a way to convey the pace of a scene. During silent films, bands would be hired to play live during screenings. Ever since then, the use of music in film has expanded. It is now commonly used in films to influence the audience's emotions. Leitmotifs, or musical themes, are the reason why when you hear this, you think of this. This concept is used all the time by composers and filmmakers to associate a musical theme with characters or objects in a film. Generally, a movie uses several leitmotifs to represent the characters and the thematic elements of the narrative. For example, in Interstellar, one leitmotif is used to symbolize the relationship between Murph and Cooper. This theme's melody begins with a note that is a seventh above the bass. This creates a feeling of vastness, suggesting the physical distance separating Murph and Cooper throughout the movie. Additionally, by juxtaposing major and minor notes, this leitmotif conveys the hurtful and loving duality of the relationship between Murph and Cooper. This leitmotif appears again in this scene.
Prepare to fire escape thrusters.
Ready?
Ready?
Ready.
Main engine ignition in 3, 2, 1.
Although Murph is not in the scene, the leitmotif reminds the audience of her. This gives more weight to Cooper's decision to detach.
Ranger 2, prepare to detach.
What? No! No! Cooper!
3.
Cooper, what are you doing?
Newton's third law. You gotta leave something behind.
You told me we had enough resources for both of us.
We agreed, Amelia. 90%.
Don't.
Details that.
In addition, the leitmotif foreshadows the connection between Cooper and Murph while he's in the Tesseract. Another leitmotif used in Interstellar represents the character's determination and strive. This musical theme is used when the main characters are trying to achieve something, whether it is Murph trying to understand the origins of the ghost in a room, or Cooper and Brand trying to convince the man not to open the airlock on the Endurance. The instruments that Hans Zimmer uses also have an influence on the audience. The main instrument used in the theme music of the film was the organ in a 12th century church in London.
And I also made the case very strongly for some feeling of religiosity to it, even though the film isn't religious, but that the organ, the architectural cathedrals and all this, they represent mankind's attempt to portray the mystical or the metaphysical, what's beyond us, beyond the realm of the everyday.
This is why the organ as the main instrument is quite fitting for the story. Although the narrative is fictional, the film is trying to represent humanity and its survival. The organ itself represents humanity.
There's something very human about it because it can only make a sound with air and it needs to breathe.
In addition to the organ, Hans Zimmer uses an orchestra of 34 strings, 24 woodwinds, 4 pianos, and a 60-voice choir. Hans Zimmer wants to convey the expanse of the character's journey and their unfamiliarity with the space around them. He does this by letting the orchestra use their instruments in non-conventional ways. The bassists start tapping the sides of their bass, and the violinists pluck the strings of their violins. The main characters, our heroes, are in uncharted territories. Even music does not behave the same way as it does on Earth. As the main characters get further away from Earth, Hans Zimmer used the choir more and more as a way to remind the audience what the character's mission is. Why are they so far from home? To save humanity. The Lord of the Rings is another example where an intricate nets of leitmotifs are set up to communicate implicit ideas. According to Howard Shore, the entire trilogy has more than 40 repeating themes. Howard Shore connects multiple leitmotifs to different aspects of the story. One of these musical themes is the Shire theme. This piece of music introduces us to the Shire. The composer uses a rural fiddle and an assortment of Celtic instruments to give a peaceful mood to the scene. The use of a whistle also keeps the music simple, reflecting the lives of the hobbits. The theme heard in this scene is repeated later in the story when Frodo and Sam leave the Shire. In this scene, the last notes of the Shire leitmotif are used to symbolize Frodo's and Sam's literal exit from the Shire and metaphorical exit from its safety. The ending of the Shire leitmotif is mixed with part of the Fellowship leitmotif, showing that the Fellowship is beginning to form. This is the first time the Fellowship theme is heard in the movie. Thus, the use of cor anglais and French horn establishes a tone of bravery and loyalty that will recur throughout the film. This theme is heard over and over as more people join the Fellowship. A relevant moment when the Fellowship leitmotif is heard again is when Elrond names the Fellowship of the Ring. Once again, short transitions from the Shire leitmotif to the Fellowship leitmotif. This reminds the audience of who Frodo is, a simple hobbit from a peaceful land. Then, as the score transitions into the Fellowship theme, Shore underscores Frodo's decision to be the ring bearer. This points out Frodo's bravery. This is the first time that the entire leitmotif is played out, signaling the Fellowship is complete.
9 companions. So be it. You shall be the Fellowship of the Ring.
Right. Where are we going?
What I tried to show is that the main event today is not seen by those of us that live in it.
Koyaanisqatsi. This experimental film puts music at the same level as the visuals.
So what I decided to do in making this film is to rip out all the foreground of a traditional film. The foreground being the actors, the characterization, the plot, the story. I tried to take the background, all of that that's just supported like wallpaper, move that up into the foreground, make that the subject.
This is why, although there are repeating leitmotifs, they are not connected to a specific object or character in the film. The beginning of the movie is filled with untouched natural landscapes. This is nature without interference, a starting point for what is to come. The music in the scenes does not try to shift the audience's attention, but rather underscores the sheer vastness and beauty of the natural landscape using an organ. The low-pitched male voices repeat the word Koyaanisqatsi, making the music sound religious, almost ritualistic. This is, in part, what the director wanted to show about the qualities of human life.
Life that is not seen and goes unquestioned. Life unquestioned is life lived in a religious state.
The low-pitched voices at the beginning of the film are present at the end of the film as well. The same is true for the melody on the organ. This gives closure to the film, while at the same time bringing the audience's attention back to the beginning of the film to point out the contrast between the untouched nature scenery to fully man-made technology. Although the melody is the same, the instruments in the first scene and the last scene are different. In the first scene, a real organ is used, while the last scene, an electric organ is used. This drives home the main point of the film, to show humanity's existence within a technological world.
It's not that we use technology, we live technology.
Bollywood cannot be skipped when talking about film music. A modern Bollywood movie Famous for its use of music is Dev.D, a 2009 contemporary adaptation of the novel Dev.D that was published in 1917. In Dev.D, each song is used to establish and strengthen a relationship between the characters. For example, the main theme of the movie uses one male and one female voice to create the main melody. The lack of lyrics forces the audience to pay attention to the meaning of each voice rather than the literal meaning of the words. In the first half of the song, only the male voice is heard. This is representative of Dev at the beginning of the film, alone and chasing after a girl who is already married. Then, as the second verse starts, the main female voice takes over the melody, while the male vocals accompany it in the background. This represents the ending of the movie, when Dev finds and accepts his true love. With one song, Amit Trivedi manages to lay out the structure of the entire movie. At its core, Dev.D is a love story, but it explores the deeper theme of female independence, making this film as much Lenny's story as it is Dev's. The simple melody used in this sequence is created using only one woodwind instrument. This reflects the simplicity of Lenny's life as a student. When Lenny meets up with her boyfriend, the beat of the music gets faster, and drums get introduced to the song, making the song upbeat. This indicates Lenny's happiness when she is with her boyfriend, making his betrayal even more emotional for the audience. Lenny's story changes dramatically when her boyfriend posts a sexual video of her online. This drastic shift is matched by the music. The xylophone gives a harsher sound to the melody compared to the woodwind used in the other song. The unnatural sounds of the auto-tune matched with cold images establish an uncomfortable tone, representing Lenny's emotions of unhappiness and regret. There is much more to film than just moving pictures. These are only a few examples of how music has been used in films to heighten the audience's experience. So next time you watch a movie, stop and listen.